The date is March 19th, 2015. We're here to interview Dr. Julian White, Distinguished Professor from FAMU. He was born in Jacksonville, attended elementary, junior high, and high school in Jacksonville, and is primarily a flute player. Tell us how all that came about, please.
I'd be more than happy to. Well, first of all, I came from an athletic family, and I wanted to follow my brother, and so he played football, and I went to the coach and said, "Sir, I'd like to go out for the football team." He looked at me and he laughed and said, "Ha ha ha, ha. Sonny, no, you can't do that. Go and play in the band with your sister." Okay, my sister played in the band. She was very good, and she played the flute. But I didn't want to play flute. I wanted to play trombone. It was a more masculine, robust kind of instrument. But my mother said, "Well, son, if you want to play in the band, we have a flute that your sister played. And you can play that flute or not play at all." So I reluctantly started to play the flute. And the reason why I didn't want to play flute was because at that time it was all girls. And so I didn't want to play the flute, but I did want to be in the band. And then I found out later on that playing the flute and being the only boy in the section wasn't so bad after all.
Wow. I understand you attended New Stanton High School and that it was a black school at the time.
Yes.
What was your experience with that?
Well, Tina, let me tell you, it was fantastic because I didn't start in band until I was in the 10th grade, the summer of my entering high school. And so I was a little bit behind everybody else, but I loved practicing and I loved playing the flute. So I worked real hard over the summer, and when we came around to the fall, I made the advanced band. Well, this band was out of the ordinary. We could play 1812, Shostakovich Symphony No. 5, Jericho Rhapsody, Les Preludes, and we played them at the band festivals that we called them at that time. And it was just a fantastic band. I was fortunate that I had a very fine band director, Mr. Colonel D. McFarland. And so I really got off to a good start with him because he was so insistent on proper performance fundamentals. So I felt like I got off to a good start.
Great. Now, does New Stanton High School still exist?
It does still exist, but it is a college preparatory school now. And when we started integration, there were some turbulent times, and the numbers, in fact, they closed the school for a while. And when they reopened it as the college preparatory school, the band had to basically start over again. And they're doing well now. They're doing well, and I'm just optimistic that they are going to continue to improve.
Wonderful. You attended FAMU as a music major?
Yes, I did. And
your master's and your doctorate, where did they come from?
Well, you mentioned, I received my BS degree from Florida A&M University. And when I graduated, I thought that, well, I'm going to go to the American Conservatory of Music, and I'm going to study playing the flute privately because I really want to be a flute player. And so the summer that I graduated, and I graduated a little bit early, maybe I studied hard, maybe I worked hard or something, but I graduated from college a semester early, and I went to Cape May, New Jersey to make some money to go to graduate school. Things didn't quite work out there, and so I ended up coming back to Jacksonville, and they gave me a job at this new high school, Northwestern Junior Senior High School, and I was the band director there, and I decided, well, since I didn't get my master's from American Conservatory, that I would go to the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana to study for my master's degree. I did that in summers. I did 5 summers at the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana, and it was just a fantastic experience. I had a chance to study with Guy Duca, with John Painter, Paul Yoder, just a fine band director, Glenn Cliff Bainham, all these guys. And so that was really just a fantastic experience for me, and so fantastic that I fell in love with band and said, look, I'm going to stay with this thing here forever.
Great. And then your doctorate came from?
From Florida State University. Now that's somewhat interesting because I had a pretty good high school band, very successful, and we made superiors at those times. And I always felt something internally, some kind of just gratification internally when the band performed. Well, Dr. Foster approached me about working at Florida A&M University. And I said, well, he gave me a year to think about it. I said, well, I've done a lot of things as a high school band director, and perhaps I should consider coming to Florida A&M. I had offers to go to many HBCU universities, colleges and universities, but I said, well, this is a time, if Dr. Foster's asking me to come to work at Florida A&M, maybe I should do it. And I felt that I had done some significant accomplishments in music, and as a high school band director, said, well, I'm going to accept the offer to go to Florida A&M. And so I went there, and being accustomed to a schedule from 7:30 to 7:30, the college teacher schedule was somewhat different. Class on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, another class on Tuesday and Thursday. So I had time. And that being the case, I took classes at Florida State. I'd come back and teach at Florida A&M, go back to Florida State. I had more parking tickets than the law would allow. But I also had a chance to study with Manny Wickham, Barnagle, Jack Spratt, Cliff Madsen, just a number of outstanding musicians and music educators. And so that's how the doctorate degree came apart.
Wow. So you taught high school for 10 years.
Yes.
And then you stayed for 40 years at Florida A&M.
Yes, I did.
Wow. Well, I understand that you were a band director through integration years.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that, please.
I'd be more than happy to. And I think that it is important that we discuss the past because it has something to do with the present and then implications for the future. So during the time when I played in the high school band, of course, it was all black. And when I became a band director, it was also all black. And we did things, we were separate, and we didn't give it a second thought. However, the level of musicality in our band, let's say the level of musicality, and my band was as good as any. And so even though we were separate, there was some competitive air about it, and then as we started to continue, I think that there became government and intervention regarding integration that we're going to have to do. So that kind of set the stage for us to integrate, and I was always aggressive. So before we even integrated, I would go over to the White Band Festival and listen. I'd go in the sight reading room and listen. I'd go to State Festival and listen because I wanted to be prepared for the change. But I think that one thing that was very, and still is important, that we recognize the culture from whence we came. And I was fortunate in that I was one of the band directors during the transition from the FABD to the FBA. And so I was able to be one of the individuals that sort of smoothed the transitions and did the kind of things that let everybody know that we have black musicians over here and they're good. We have white musicians over here and they're good. We put the two together and we have really just an excellent amalgamation of racial equity. And so that kind of thing I think was very important, and I felt somewhat at ease that we were able to make the transition and to make it very smooth. Even though I must admit that a significant number of high school bands were relegated to assistant band directors and junior high schools. And so I felt that kind of thing was rather unfair, because we had good band directors who had good high school bands, but they closed the high school, and then the black band director would become the assistant band director at another school. But then in time, things changed, and there was more acceptance. And I'll admit, at first there were apprehensions on both sides, but in time we started to accept, and I think band directors started to accept that this is inevitable. And that kind of thing says we're going to work together we're going to do a good job in making this transition and make things work. And I think that's why we are to this point now wherein we can include all bands, and there's not very much emphasis on color and race.
That's great. I think I'd like to clarify something. You said at that time you were rather aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
I believe you meant intellectually aggressive and musically aggressive.
Yes.
Not physically aggressive.
Oh, no, not at all.
Okay.
In fact,
I just want to clarify that.
I was not physically aggressive.
During your career, tell me about some pivotal moments and some pivotal people.
I think, first of all, let me talk about the pivotal people. I mentioned my high school band director, Mr. Colonel D. McFarland, and then we did exchange concerts with Chief Wilson and Mr. Blake from Middleton High School, from Blake High School, T.J. Simpson from Blake High School. And so they were very good band directors. And I guess somehow I had an instinct that that's maybe what I would want to do. And so I watched them, things they would do. I watched their rehearsals, and my high school band director kind of let me even work with beginners when I was in high school. So those were pivotal individuals during my life. My sister-in-law, Ms. Norma Solomon White, was also an inspiration to me because she was one of the pioneers in the FABD. And so then in high school, in college, of course, Dr. William P. Foster, who served as my university band director, and I had all the teachers in the music department at Florida A&M were somewhat instrumental in my success. And then I think that very significant was the individuals who I had a chance to do graduate study with, and I mentioned Ravelli, Painter, those guys, Guy Duca, and Manley Whitcomb, and all those guys. I think those were pivotal moments in my life. Paul Yoder, Dick Bowles, Harold Bachman, because I listened. I was always a person who would listen, and sometimes I was a fly on the wall. I'd go sit in Mark Hines' rehearsal, and I'd just sit and I'd observe and I'd make notes, or in John Painter's rehearsal. So those were pivotal points in my life because I think that it set the course that I could achieve artistic excellence if I followed the path of those individuals.
Those are some great mentors.
Yes.
Well, now we've come to the heart of the matter. Words of wisdom or advice you'd like to pass on?
I think that is so important because sometimes when young band directors enter into the teaching profession, they have a lot of theories that need some practical application with it. And some little simple things I'll say. First, you've got to be a part of the school team. You've got to sign in. You've got to do requisitions. You've got to do your reports. You're going to have to order your buses. You're going to have to make arrangements for meals and all those things that sometimes you may take for granted. But those things must be done in order for you to be successful. I have a thing that I call PASS. Parents, administrators, teachers, and students. And a beginning band director needs to make sure that they develop positive relationship with those individuals. The parents. Parents don't run the organization, but they can be so helpful to you in the total operation of your band program. And then administrators. Sometimes we tend to overlook administrators. We want instruments, we want uniforms, but sometimes we don't go about the right path. You must show them the proper amount of respect, that they are the chief person and they're the chief operating officer in the school. So you don't go out and accept engagements without informing the principal. You don't change rehearsal hours, school hours. You don't get kids out of classes because that is showing a lack of respect for the administrators. So I have parents, administrators, teachers. So important. The student is not only there to play in the band. In fact, primarily, they're there for an education. So you can't overstep your boundaries in demanding so much time from the students that they don't have an opportunity to get their assignments, to get their homework. And then finally, I say the students. And that is very important because there are aspects. You've got to teach music. You must study the craft and you must love it. If you don't have a great deal, if you don't have a great love for music, you're not going to do a good job with it. And these kids are very perceptive. They can determine when you are interested in what they're doing and when you're not interested. So the relationship that you have with your children, with your students, and you see they should also make sure that your students experience success. Whether it's the last chair clarinet player or the first chair clarinet player, that person must feel that they are an important part of the band program. And so success is very important. I would have sometimes that I may say, Johnny, you're not playing your part right. And I'd come down, I'd be very stern with him. But at some point, I'm going to come back and uplift that student so that they don't develop an inferiority complex. And then the other thing, I think musicality. You have to be very careful. You've got to teach performance fundamentals. You've got to do the tone quality, the intonation, the articulation, the phrasing, the balance, the interpretation, those things, and you have to study it. I can't overemphasize the fact that you can't waste students' time. You've got to know that score when you come into the rehearsal. You can't teach a halftime show with papers in your hand and expecting the students to learn on the spot. You've got to have that show in your head. And then you've got to be able to impart it to the students because you're wasting their time. If you are not prepared for that music rehearsal, you're not prepared for that field rehearsal, then the students are going to detect that and you're going to waste their time and you're going to have discipline problems. So that's one thing. Now, the other thing that I have, and I think I developed this over the years, that there's a certain aspect, there's certain qualities and certain things that students must do. And I say, first of all, you've got to get your head involved in what you're doing. Your head says, and this is for students, the head says, I'm going to come to class on time. I'm going to come to rehearsal on time. I'm going to be respectful to my teachers and my band directors. I'm going to follow through with rules and regulations that we have in band. In other words, they're going to commit themselves to be well disciplined in the band. So I say the first thing you have to do is get the kids committed mentally. The next thing that's very important is the ears. I say the head, the ears, they've got to be able to hear. You've got to teach the students how to hear. You've got to teach them, you can get a strobe tuner, and the student can develop 20/20 vision and not hear a thing. You see, so you've got to teach, you've got to develop the ears, you've got to play chorales, you've got to sing, you've got to play melodies, you've got to, when students are playing, they need to know what are the tones in the chord. How important is this particular tone in the chord? So you've got to develop the ears. They need to know when they're playing on. They need to know when they're articulating incorrectly. That's one thing. And then the eyes. Head, ears, eyes. They're going to have to be able to see. They're going to have to be able to read. They're going to have to be able to interpret surroundings. They're going to have to be able to play not just a note. You don't get credit for playing notes. You get credit for playing what's around the notes. So they're going to have to see that. They're going to have to see. So they're going to have to develop the eyes. And these things may sound kind of metaphoric, but I have found that after 53 years of teaching, I believe they work. And I employ them along the way. And the next thing they've got to do, they've got to develop the hands. The hand says, I'm going to learn my music. I'm going to learn my parts. I'm going to learn my parts. I'm going to learn my parts. I'm going to do what I have to do. And that comes along with musical integrity because they are a part of the band program, of the teamwork that they're doing in band. And so they're going to have to develop the hands. And I pass that on to young band directors and say, remember, the head, the ears, the eyes, the hands, And there's one other thing, the heart. You've got to involve yourself in music. You've got to believe in what you're doing. You're going to have to get, if you can get into the students' heart and to their heads, everything else is going to be a winner. And you get into the heart and the mind, the head, by showing that you care. You know, many times we're mom, dad, we're sister, brother, and everything else. And so you got to let that student know that you care. And when they know that you care, they'll do just about anything for you. So those things, you know, and I'll just read real quick: head, ears, eyes, hand, and heart. Parents, administrators, students, and teachers.
Absolutely. I want to back up just a little bit to history again.
Mm-hmm.
You have mentioned several times FABD.
Mm-hmm.
I believe there may be some folks who don't know what that stands for. What does that stand for?
That is the Florida Association of Band Directors. And that was the black organization. Started some time ago by Timothy Savage, and I'll think of his name pretty soon. But that was the Kirksey, Leander Kirksey. Okay, and he started that term, FABD. They met on the campus of Florida A&M University, had basically the same kind of structure that FBA has. They utilize the same judges, you know, Dick Bowles, Harold Bachman, all the guys. They used all the Rob Croshaw, everybody. And so they had the same kind of standards. It was just separate. It's separate. And I can't say that it was equal. It was separate. They had better instruments than we did. They had better uniforms than we did. And so, but then in time, we came together. But that history, that FABD, and the term of band in every school, I think was the foundation, and the quality of bands that we had back there, the excellent teaching. And let me tell you something, those guys could teach. Oh, I mean, they could teach because, too, some of the conditions that they had to teach under, many people would not teach under those circumstances. You know, lack of instruments, a lack of uniform, a lack of an ample budget, and this kind of thing. But they taught and they achieved in spite of, not because of. So that history of FABD is very important. And I feel very lucky that I had a chance to experience FABD and FBA.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Something about your personal character that I know you're very modest, but now I want you to brag about yourself just a little bit.
Well, again, I love music and I love being a band director, so I had quite a few successes, if I can use that term. With my high school band, we made superiors at district and state festivals. We traveled quite a bit. We performed in Mexico. In fact, one of the highlights of our performance in Mexico was the fact that we were playing, and after state festival, I had to find something to do with the music. So I told them to memorize it. And as we were playing the concert, the lights went out. And lo and behold, we continued to play in the dark, and the audience they were just flabbergasted by what we did. So, you know, that was, and then teaching at Florida A&M, performing in Paris, France, was a high point of my career. I served as the director of the McDonald's All-American, the drill sergeant, the drill coordinator for the McDonald's All-American High School Band. So I wrote the drills for Macy's, for the Rose Bowl, for the Fiesta Bowl, and that, you know, that was very good. And then performing a concert at the FMEA convention were, you know, another highlight. And then performing at the American Bandmasters Association was just great. And then, you know, doing Super Bowls, doing the Emmy Awards, and those kind of things were just, they were outstanding. And I enjoyed doing all of those. It was just a joy and kind of just a reward. I would like to thank for the hard work that I put into the band. And then, with FABD, talking about a little bit of history, I served as the district chair and the district secretary. Then as I transitioned on, and to let you know how much progress we made, I served on the FME board for about 6 or 8 years as the president of the Black Caucus, and then as the student advisor for MENC. I did that, and then just other things that I thought was so pivotal to my success and to my professionalism.
Mm-hmm. But you're doing it again. Instead of talking about yourself,
Yes.
you're talking about the accomplishments of your students and the accomplishments that you've been able to achieve because of your students' successes.
Yes. That's how I feel about it too.
Okay. So you have a very strong work ethic. Do you think that's important for your students to have that also?
I think that it is very important to have a very strong work ethic. I think that band directors and young teachers will have to be very careful, though, that they don't spend an inordinate amount of time with the band. It's so easy to do that, but they must remember family and get a good balance between band rehearsals and band activities and family, because the two go hand in hand. And if there's an unbalance, if there's just too much, then it can have an effect on the family structure. But they must have a strong work ethic, because being a band director, as we all know, is not an easy task. And so you've got to love it and have a strong work ethic in order to be successful.
Well, you spoke about FABD and about FBA.
Mm-hmm.
I know from having seen you at lots of conventions and FBA events that you're very nurturing to the younger directors and you welcome them.
Yes.
You're also very nurturing to your colleagues.
Yes.
And that you feel networking is important. Can you expand on that just a little? Because we're getting close to time here.
Absolutely, and I'll be brief. I think that in working with students and in working with, say, a university band staff, it has to be a sharing process. It's not my band, it's our band. And we have to share in the work. We also have to share in the moments where they're exposed, they're in public. Let them conduct. Let the students know that they can have a hand in what they're doing, in the organizational structure. Let everybody feel that they are an integral part of the organization. And then I think that you have a better blend of personalities that will work very well together.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've talked a lot about what you did during your career. And I know your career is still going on, although you are not on the campus of the university every day, holding class every day.
Yes.
But you've got music outreach programs, and you're being a mentor to directors, mainly in the Jacksonville area right now.
Yes, yes.
Talk a little bit about those things. We've got a couple minutes left.
Okay. Well, briefly, in Jacksonville, I serve as a clinician, a consultant for bands. And I go around to school, I listen at rehearsals, I observe marching band rehearsals, and make comments, kind of like having a pre-adjudication for marching MPA and for concert MPA. So I do that about 20 hours a week, and that's gratifying because I'm from Jacksonville. I want to see bands thrive. In addition to that, I am Director of Musical Outreach for Goodwill Industries, and this is really fantastic. I teach students from 7 to 70. I teach disadvantaged, I teach special needs. And I want to tell you something about, well, those two, and briefly, the disadvantaged. When the special needs, when I can get a kid who may have some kind of special needs and I can get them to get a tone out of an instrument, it is extremely gratifying to me but also to the kids. I mean, they just light up like a Christmas tree, and that's so good. And then teaching disadvantaged that they may not be able to afford an instrument, and I can give them an instrument to play. So those things that I know I'm supposed to be retired now, but I'm also doing forming a 369th Regiment Band. This is a carryover from the World War One. This is a part of the World War Centennial. And I'm going to form a band, a 65-piece band that replicates that particular organization. It was an all-black organization, and they were very good musicians. So I have the task of forming that band, a 65-piece band, and I'm looking forward to it.
Wow, that's really exciting. I have just enough time for one little story. I understand that when you went to State Festival in Pensacola, you
Yes.
told your students that
Yes.
if they made superiors.
Yes.
Finish that story.
Okay, we worked real hard for that festival, and I told the students we were playing some difficult music, and I told the students if we made superior, that I would let them throw me in the pool in my band uniform. We made straight superiors. They didn't forget. We got out of the bus. They picked me up and threw me in the water in my band uniform. Okay, I took off. I started taking off. I'm a strong swimmer, and I started taking off my clothes. And the kid, he's taking off his clothes. But when I got out of the water, I had on my swimming trunks. I had confidence in them, even though we realized, it doesn't always work with confidence. But I felt real good about them, and so they were gratified to know that I had the confidence in them to put on my swimming trunks.
Well, that is a great story to finish up with. It shows your nurturing nature and
you.
how you had faith in them.
Absolutely.
And how they never would have known the difference had they not gotten those superiors.
Absolutely. That's
So
a good
it's
point.
time to say bye-bye.
Thank you for the interview. I certainly enjoyed it, and I am most appreciative to the FBA for allowing me to do this legacy interview.